The stars over the Vega frontier were quiet, as if the galaxy itself had fallen asleep. For weeks, the scientists aboard the Vega research station had studied the glowing clouds of gas and the strange radiation signals that pulsed like a heartbeat. In the dark, to them, it was just another night, another set of numbers to record. They laughed in the cafeteria, sent messages home, and talked about when they would next visit Earth. No one knew that within minutes their voices would turn to screams. It started with a shadow. At first, the scanners showed nothing unusual, then the screens lit up with hundreds of unknown contacts appearing at once. The technicians leaned closer, confused. Ships had never appeared like that. Not without warning, not in such formation. The commander of the station frowned and asked for confirmation, but the radar only screamed louder, blinking red as the contacts moved in at impossible speed. The first blast came without a word. A beam of searing light cut through the void and smashed into one of the defense satellites. The screen flashed white, then silence. Before anyone could react, more beams followed, tearing into the outer shields of the station. The hull groaned. As metal twisted, an alarm screamed through every hallway. "Who are they?" Someone shouted. The communications officer sent out a broad distress signal, but only static filled the channel. The unknown ships had already jammed every frequency. Then a message broke through, a deep voice that was not human. Its tone was sharp, cold, full of contempt. "Kneel or perish," the voice said. Then silence. No name, no reason, only a promise of death. The people on the station panicked. Some tried to fight back, firing small defense cannons at the approaching fleet, but the blasts bounced harmlessly off alien shields. The scientist and crew screamed as more enemy fire tore through the laboratories. Whole sections of the station ripped apart, bodies spinning into the endless dark. On Earth, the last desperate transmission came through, a broken signal full of static and terror. The image flickered across the main command screens. A young woman in a torn uniform shouted into the camera, "They are not here to talk. They are killing everyone. Tell Earth. Tell them to..." Her words cut off in a burst of fire. The screen went black. The leaders of humanity sat in silence, watching the smoke and fire that ended the message. Anger spread through the war councils. Some demanded to know who these aliens were, others already knew the answer from deep records. The Krethar Dominion, an ancient empire known in whispers, believed that all other species were weak slaves meant to kneel before them. The Krethar had ignored humanity for centuries, considering them too small, too young to be noticed. But now they had arrived at the borders of human space with fleets designed for conquest. They had destroyed a station not for strategy but for a warning. They wanted humanity to fear. They wanted submission. But humanity did not kneel. Humanity remembered the screams of Vega. Humanity remembered the faces of the dying. In homes and colonies across the stars, people gathered around hollow screens, watching the news of the sudden massacre. Families wept for lost sons and daughters, but their grief turned to fury. Shipyards came alive. Engineers worked day and night. Soldiers rushed to their posts. Even the old ships, long forgotten in orbital docks, were pulled out and repaired. Humanity's anger was growing, boiling, ready to burst. In the quiet of his cabin aboard Earth's defense flagship, Admiral Raines stood before the stars, his jaw clenched as he replayed the last message from Vega. He knew what the Krethar wanted. He knew what they thought of humanity. But he also knew something else, something the Krethar had never understood. When humanity was pushed, when humanity was cornered, they did not bow, they fought. "Signal every fleet," Raines ordered, his voice hard as steel. "We are at war." Across the galaxy, the Krethar ships gathered like wolves, preparing to strike again. They believed victory would be quick. They believed humanity was weak. They did not yet understand. They had made a mistake. They had made humanity angry. The stars would soon burn with fire. The galaxy would remember the name of the last species that tried to break humanity and failed. The smoke of the Vega station still haunted every news screen across human space. Families cried for their loved ones. But beyond the grief there was rage. The Krethar had not only killed innocent scientists, they had declared humanity weak. Disposable humanity had been underestimated before, but never like this. On Mars' command, the highest leaders of the fleet sat in silence around a long steel table. Maps of the stars glowed across the walls, showing red lines of enemy advance. At the head of the table, Admiral Rains stood with his hands behind his back. His voice carried a weight that made the room feel colder. "The Crethar Dominion believes we will kneel. They believe we are afraid," he said. His gaze swept across the room. They are wrong. Every officer knew the name Crethar, but many thought it was only a legend. Old whispers from long-range explorers. Now the truth was alive and burning. The Crethar Dominion was real, and they had just announced themselves with blood. The enemy had sent a single transmission to humanity's leaders. The screen had filled with the image of a creature tall and armored. Its head was ridged like stone, its eyes glowing with cruel fire. The alien spoke in perfect translation, as if it had studied humanity for centuries. "Your kind builds toys and calls them ships. You build cities and call them worlds. But to us you are cattle, kneel and live as slaves, or resist and die like Vega." The officers in the War Council clenched their fists. Some wanted to send a message back, to spit in the alien's face. But Admiral Rains raised a hand. His voice was calm, but inside he felt the same fire burning as every soldier in the room. "We do not answer threats with words. We answer with warships." Across the colonies, the call to arms echoed. On Earth, people lined up outside recruitment. Hall's sons and daughters signed their names and took oaths. Factories roared to life, building weapons, armor, and the steel hulls of new ships. On the lunar shipyards, engineers worked without rest, patching old dreadnoughts and constructing new carriers. Every dock glowed with the sparks of welders. Every orbit filled with ships arming for battle. But the Crethar did not wait. Only weeks after Vega, they struck again. This time it was the mining colony of Harlan's Reach. Thousands lived there, digging deep into the asteroids for rare minerals. The colony had only a handful of patrol ships, no real defenses. When the Crethar fleet arrived, the patrol ships tried to stand their ground. Their captains shouted courage into their comms. For Earth, for humanity. Before their ships were torn apart in bursts of alien fire, the miners could only watch as Crethar warships surrounded them. Then the invaders sent down shuttles. Soldiers poured into the colony, tall, armored beasts with weapons that glowed. Like lightning, they herded people into cages, slaughtered anyone who resisted. The Crethar believed fear would break the humans, but instead, it planted a seed of something far more dangerous. One boy, no older than 16, smuggled a recorder into the shadows. He captured the screams, the fire, the Crethar voice shouting commands. That message was smuggled out on a small cargo runner that escaped the blockade. When it reached Earth, the footage played across every channel. Every human heart turned from grief into fury. The words of the boy burned into the minds of billions. His voice shook, but carried steel. "They think we will kneel, but we are not kneeling. We are waiting, and we will make them pay." Those words spread like wildfire, printed on banners, whispered in the streets. The Crethar thought they were breaking humanity, but they were forging it into something sharper than steel. The High Council met again, this time not in fear, but in unity. Every admiral, every general, every politician agreed. Humanity was not facing an enemy who could be reasoned with. They were facing a predator who would never stop, that left only one path. "Extermination of the Dominion," Admiral Rains said. His voice echoed like thunder across the chamber. Already the fleets were forming. In the shipyards, the dreadnought, Resolute, came to life. Its engines burned blue as it left the dock. Hundreds of fighters filled its hangars. Its cannons could tear moons apart. Behind it, carriers, destroyers, and frigates joined in long, shining lines. More ships than the galaxy had ever seen flying under one banner. Across the stars, the Crethar Dominion laughed. To them, humanity was small, a new species pretending to be powerful. They sent messages to their slave worlds, mocking the humans, boasting that soon Earth itself would burn. But in the silence of space, humanity's rage was building. Admiral Rains stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as more and more warships joined the fleet. He remembered the faces from Vega, the screams from Harlan's Reach. He whispered to himself, You wanted war. You will have it. The galaxy watched from the shadows. Other alien races held their breath. Some prayed for humanity to fall. Others prayed for them to win. No one could deny what was coming. A storm of fire, steel, and blood was about to sweep across the stars. The Krethar thought humanity would kneel. Instead, they had awakened the one truth written deep in human history. Humanity did not bow. Humanity fought, and when humanity was angry, nothing in the galaxy could stand against them. The galaxy was still burning with the memory of Vega and Harlan's reach. The Krethar Dominion thought they had delivered a warning, but instead they had awakened something far more dangerous. Across human space, grief was turning into resolve, and resolve into rage. Humanity had decided they would not only fight, they would prepare for a war unlike any the stars had ever seen. On Earth, the skies above the oceans glowed with the lights of warship factories. Massive floating platforms churned out steel like rivers. Carriers stretched for kilometers, their hangars yawning wide to receive fighters. Dreadnoughts rose from dry docks, their hulls plated with armor thicker than city walls. Even the old ships, once thought too ancient to fight, were dragged from orbit and reforged with new weapons. The Tien, lunar shipyards never slept. Sparks rained down from towering scaffolds as engineers worked in shifts that never ended. Whole families volunteered, mothers welding alongside fathers, children running food and water to the workers. There was no separation now between soldier and civilian. Everyone was part of the war effort. Humanity itself had become a war machine. Admiral Rains stood on the deck of his flagship, the Resolute, staring at the growing fleet in orbit. Destroyers formed neat lines, carriers gleamed like floating fortresses, and swarms of fighters zipped between them like restless sparks. For the first time in history, humanity's scattered colonies and rival governments had united. Every ship flew under the same flag. The Krethar thought they had attacked a divided people, but what they had truly done was forge one unstoppable force. Across the colony's training grounds overflowed. Soldiers marched in endless rows, their boots pounding against steel. Drill instructors shouted until their voices cracked. Young men and women learned to handle rifles, to board dropships, to fight in vacuum. Many had never held a weapon before. Vega, but now their eyes burned with the same fury as veterans. They did not speak of fear, only vengeance. The news networks broadcast the preparation, stirring hearts with every image. Families sent their sons and daughters to war, not with tears of despair, but with pride. One mother held her child close before he boarded a troop transport. "Fight hard, come home proud," she whispered. Around them, whole crowds cheered. Humanity had not been broken. It had been bound together. Still, Admiral Rains knew preparation alone was not enough. The Krethar had fought wars for centuries. They enslaved whole worlds. They devoured resistance like predators. But they had one weakness. They did not understand humanity's rage. The Admiral gathered his commanders aboard the Resolute. Around a glowing map of the stars, he traced the enemy's advance. "They will strike again," he said. His voice was steady. "They believe us fragile. They believe our anger is only noise. We will show them what happens when humanity's anger is turned into action." The commanders nodded. Each one carried their own story of loss. A brother on Vega, a daughter on Harlan's Reach. For them, this was not only duty, it was personal. They began to plan. Human intelligence teams had intercepted fragments of Krethar code. From those fragments, a picture formed. A massive Krethar fleet was gathering near the Vega line, preparing to strike again. But this time, humanity would not wait. They would meet the Krethar head-on. The shipyards pushed harder. Within weeks, whole new fleets were ready. Fighters were loaded into carriers. Railguns were tested with deafening blasts. Torpedoes were armed and stored like sleeping thunder. Even experimental weapons, once locked in research labs, were fitted onto dreadnoughts. The galaxy would see the full fury of human invention. In the halls of the High Council, debates once divided by politics had vanished. Leaders who once argued over resources now shouted the same word: war. A single declaration was signed and broadcast to every colony. Humanity stands united. Humanity stands angry. Humanity stands ready. On the frontier worlds, civilians prepared too. Farmers converted machinery into armored vehicles. Miners forged crude weapons from tools. Entire populations vowed to resist if Krethar armies landed. Humanity was no longer waiting to be saved by fleets. They were ready to fight with their own hands. Still, there was unease. Rumors spread of Krethar cruelty, whispers that they used living weapons, that their soldiers were bred in vats of blood. Some feared humanity would not survive such monsters. But in every tavern, every barracks, every factory, those fears burned away when the boy's words from Harlan's Reach played again. We are not kneeling, we are waiting. Now, humanity was no longer waiting. Humanity was moving. The day of departure came. From Earth to the far colonies, crowds gathered to watch the fleets rise. Hundreds of ships cut across the skies, engines roaring like storms. Children pointed and cheered as carriers blocked out the stars. People whispered prayers, sang songs, shouted promises into the air. Admiral Rains watched from the bridge as his fleet stretched across the void, a sea of steel and firepower. He clenched his fist, not in doubt, but in certainty. The Krethar had made the greatest mistake of their empire. They had mistaken humanity's kindness for weakness. They had mistaken humanity's silence for fear. They had mistaken humanity's grief for surrender. But now they would learn. Humanity's grief had become rage, and humanity's rage had become war. The fleets met at Vega, the same system where humanity's blood had first been spilled. The stars there were silent witnesses to the crimes of the Krethar, but now they would witness humanity's answer. The Krethar came in force, 300 warships sliding out of hyperspace like knives. Their hulls were black and jagged, bristling with weapons that pulsed like veins of fire. They moved with the confidence of predators, certain that the prey before them would scatter. But humanity did not scatter. 200 human ships waited in formation. Carriers loomed with hangars wide, destroyers lined up like spears, and dreadnoughts stood in the center, massive fortresses of steel. Fighters swarmed around them like angry insects, buzzing and ready to sting. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Rains stood tall. His officers waited for his order, tension sharp as a blade. He looked out at the stars filled with enemy ships and remembered the screams of Vega, the cages of Harlan's Reach. His jaw tightened. "Send the message," he said. A transmission went out, not of words, but of silence. For a full minute, humanity sent only one image, the broken research station at Vega, charred and torn. Then the signal cut, and weapons armed across the fleet. Humanity was done talking. The Krethar fired first. Lances of red energy slashed through the void. 2 human frigates exploded instantly, burning wreckage scattering like sparks. But the human fleet held position. Their shields absorbed the next barrage. And then Admiral Rains gave the order. Fire. The void erupted. Railguns roared, hurling metal slugs the size of houses. Torpedoes streaked forward, leaving trails of fire. Lasers cut across the dark like blades of sunlight. The Krethar shields flared as impacts crashed into them. Dozens of alien ships staggered under the storm. Fighters swarmed from carriers in waves, darting between the massive ships. They weaved through fire, dropping bombs onto Krethar hulls. Some were torn apart by plasma cannons, but others struck true. Explosions ripping through alien cruisers. For every human fighter lost, another charged in, fearless. The battle became chaos. Ships collided, shields broke, flames and debris spun through the black. A human destroyer, the Indomitable, took a direct hit and split apart. Its captain refused to retreat, instead ramming what was left of his ship into a Krethar battleship. Both vessels went up in a blinding explosion. The shockwave sent fighters tumbling. On the Resolute, alarm screamed, "Shields at 60%, an officer shouted. The ship shuddered as beams raked across its armor, but Rains did not flinch. "Hold the line," he commanded. "Do not let them pass." The Krethar pressed harder. Their fleet was larger, their weapons ancient and cruel. They fired living torpedoes, organic things that latched onto hulls, and burrowed deep. Human engineers rushed to cut them free before they exploded. The cost was high. Ships burned, thousands died, but still the humans fought. Hours passed, and the battle raged with no side yielding. The Crethar could not believe. What they saw, humanity was not breaking. Humanity was not fleeing. They were fighting back with fury that made even the veteran warlords uneasy. Then came the moment that turned the tide. The human carrier Valiant had taken heavy damage. Its hull was cracked, its engines failing. The captain, bleeding but smiling, sent one final message. For Earth, for humanity. With engines roaring, the Valiant rammed straight into the Crethar flagship. The collision tore both ships apart in a sun-bright explosion. The shockwave rippled through the battlefield, scattering Crethar formations. Cheers erupted across human comms. Fighters surged forward with renewed rage. Destroyers cut into the weakened Crethar lines. Dreadnoughts fired everything they had. Railgun slugs ripped through alien armor. Laser beams carved ships in two. At last, the Crethar faltered. They had expected prey, but they had found predators. Their commanders ordered retreat. Their fleet pulled back, leaving wreckage and fire behind. The human fleet did not chase. They could not. Too many ships were crippled. Too many lives already gone. But they had held the line. They had met the Crethar in open battle and proved the impossible. Humanity could fight them as equals. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence fell as the stars cleared of enemy ships. Admiral Rains looked at the ruined battlefield, thousands of wrecks drifting, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." Across the galaxy, the message spread. For the first time, the Crethar had been stopped. For the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as prey, not as cattle, but as warriors who would never kneel. But victory had a price. Millions mourned the dead. Ships that had names, histories, and families were now dust. Yet out of that loss came fire. Humanity's anger only grew. They had shown they could hold the line. Now they would prepare to push it forward. The Crethar had bloodied humanity. Humanity had bloodied them back. Both sides knew the war was far from over. The next clash would not be a defense, it would be an invasion. The wreckage from Vega drifted silently in the dark. Thousands of broken ships, both human and Crethar, floated as tombs in the void. The battle had ended, but its scars echoed across the galaxy. Humanity had held the line. Yet every survivor knew this was not the end. The Crethar dominion would not retreat forever. They would return. And next time, they would strike at the very heart of mankind. In the command chamber of the Resolute, Admiral Rains stood with his officers. Their eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but none of them wavered. Around them, hollow screens flickered with intercepted fragments of Crethar transmissions. They were broken, scrambled, alien in form, but a team of human cryptographers worked night and day to unravel the codes. At last, one young officer raised her head, her voice trembling. "Admiral, we've cracked it." The room fell silent. She projected the message into the air, alien symbols twisted into human letters. The words were clear, chilling, and undeniable. Primary. Objective. Earth. Full invasion force assembling. Estimated time of strike. 3 months. The officers exchanged glances of shock. One muttered under his breath, "They're coming for the cradle." Rains said nothing for a moment. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the words. He had expected more raids, more skirmishes, but not this. The Crethar intended to burn Earth itself, to make humanity kneel once and for all. The council was called. Leaders from every colony gathered in a vast chamber on Mars. Some were pale, with fear. Others clenched their fists with fury. The footage of Vega and Harlan's reach replayed again, followed by the Crethar message. When the final word faded into silence, the chamber erupted in shouts. "We cannot fight them, their fleets are too large," one governor cried. "We must negotiate. Surrender some worlds. Save the rest," another argued. "Cowards." A soldier barked, slamming his fist against the table. "If we give them one world, they will take the next, and the next they will not stop." The voices clashed like thunder until Admiral Rains stood. His voice silenced the room. "The Crethar believe they are inevitable. They believe Earth will fall. They believe humanity will kneel. But they are wrong. He leaned forward, his tone sharp as steel. We will not wait for them to strike Earth. We will meet them in the stars, and we will show them what it means to make humanity angry. The chamber roared with approval. The decision was made. Humanity would not defend passively. Humanity would fight with everything it had. The war machine of Earth spun faster than ever before. Factories poured out weapons, shipyards released carriers in record time, even hidden black projects, experimental. Ships armed with weapons that had never been tested were brought into the fleets. Engineers worked without sleep. Soldiers trained until they collapsed. The countdown to invasion had begun, and humanity meant to be ready. Every message channel was filled with unity. The words of the boy from Harlan's Reach, "We are not kneeling, we are waiting," became a battle cry. Posters spread across cities, soldiers painted the words on their armor. Pilots carved them onto their fighters. Humanity was not waiting any longer. They were preparing. Admiral Rains toured the fleets as they formed. He walked the decks of dreadnoughts, the hangars of carriers, the training grounds of soldiers. Everywhere he went, he saw the same fire. Civilians waved from colony domes, cheering the fleets as they passed overhead. Entire planets turned their eyes toward the stars, knowing the next battle would decide everything. Meanwhile, intelligence officers pieced together more Crethar codes. What they found confirmed humanity's worst fears. The invasion force gathering for Earth was larger than anything humanity had ever seen. Over 500 Crethar warships, carriers filled with slave soldiers, and dreadnoughts armed with weapons designed to shatter worlds. It was not just a fleet. It was an empire's fury aimed at one planet. The news reached the streets. Fear swept through the colonies, but alongside fear came something stronger: resolve. A mother sent her daughter to join the Marines, whispering, "If they touch Earth, they will regret it." A miner gave up his last savings to buy steel for ship armor. Whole cities organized blood drives, supply banks, and resistance drills. If Earth fell, humanity would fight from every world, every moon, every rock. In the shadows of the galaxy, other alien races watched. Some whispered that humanity was doomed. Others whispered in awe that perhaps these humans could do the impossible. No one dared to intervene. For the first time in centuries, the Crethar were being challenged. As the EI fleets assembled, Admiral Rains stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the stars. He remembered Vega, the screams, the fire, the arrogance of the Crethar voice. He clenched his fist. They think Earth is the end. They don't see that Earth is the beginning. 3 months. That was all the time humanity had. 3 months before the Crethar invasion. 3 months before Earth itself became a battlefield. But humanity was ready. The last species to make humanity angry had already written their own fate. The stars would soon blaze with war, and the galaxy would never forget the battle that was coming. The skies above Earth had never looked so full. For weeks, the orbits had grown crowded with ships, layers upon layers of steel and firepower. Carriers drifted like titans. Dreadnoughts loomed like mountains. Swarms of fighters patrolled in endless circles. Every human shipyard had given birth to war machines, and now they stood as a wall before the homeworld. On the ground, cities across Earth held their breath. Families gathered in shelters. Children clutched banners that read, "We are not kneeling." Streets were empty, but the skies glowed with the trails of defense satellites and orbital cannons. Humanity had turned its cradle into a fortress. It was no longer only Earth. It was the beating heart of human rage. Then the horizon of space tore open. The Crethar arrived. They came in waves, their fleet blotting out the stars, 500 warships, carriers bristling with weapons, monstrous dreadnoughts armed with planet killers. Their ships were alive, with dark energy, glowing veins pulsing across black armor. They moved like predators circling their prey. The first message came across the comms, cold and cruel. Earth will kneel, or Earth will burn. The alien voice laughed, a sound like grinding stone on the bridge of the Resolute. Admiral Rains stood with his officers, his eyes never left the screen. "Mute it," he ordered. Humanity did not need words. Humanity needed war. The Crethar opened fire. Beams of red energy slashed through the void. Defense satellites lit up and exploded, but human shields held. Then Admiral Rains raised his hand, his voice calm and sharp. Fire! The battle began. Railguns thundered, launching slugs at near light speed. Torpedoes streaked through the dark, explosions ripping into Crethar shields. Human carriers released swarms of fighters. Thousands of small ships darting forward, weaving through enemy fire. Lasers and missiles turned the space above Earth into a storm of light and fire. The Crethar responded with fury. Their weapons spat organic projectiles, living torpedoes that latched onto human ships and burrowed into their hulls before detonating. A destroyer screamed as its spine cracked in half, flames spilling into the void. Fighters rushed to cover it, sacrificing themselves to break the Crethar wave. On Earth's surface, the battle looked like the end of days. Bright lines of fire cut across the sky. Explosions flashed like new suns. Children pressed against the windows of bunkers, eyes wide with both fear and pride. Their world was under attack, but their fleets were not yielding. The Crethar dreadnought, Gorthon's wrath, broke through the line. Its massive cannons charged, aiming directly at Earth. If it fired, millions would die. Admiral Rains did not hesitate. All batteries, target that ship. The Resolute and 3 dreadnoughts unleashed. Their full firepower, railguns hammered, lasers carved, and torpedoes tore into its armor. The Crethar dreadnought burned and broke apart before it could fire. Humanity roared with triumph, but the cost was high. Ships burned across every sector. Carriers lost half. Their fighters, destroyers, floated crippled, still trying to fight with what weapons remained. The Crethar pressed harder, wave after wave. They believed Earth would break. On the Valiant II, Captain Marlowe faced the impossible. His carrier was surrounded. Its hangars were on fire, its engines dying. He looked at his crew, their faces smeared with smoke, and smiled with grim pride. If we fall with purpose, he said, with engines screaming their last. The Valiant II rammed directly into a Crethar carrier. Both ships vanished in a sunburst of flame. The shockwave cleared a path for human fighters to push through. The battle raged for hours, and still neither side yielded. Above Earth, the void became a graveyard, wreckage drifting in endless silence. But humanity did not stop. Humanity did not kneel. At last, the Crethar began to falter. Their formations broke as human dreadnoughts drove forward. Fighters swarmed their crippled ships. Missiles and torpedoes pounded without mercy. The Crethar had believed this would be quick, but they had never faced prey that bit back so hard. When the retreat order finally came from the Crethar command, their fleet limped away, broken and burning. Earth still stood, scarred but unbroken. Humanity had defended its cradle. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it could not be enslaved. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence hung heavy as the last Crethar ships vanished. Officers slumped in exhaustion. Some wept, some whispered prayers. Admiral Rains closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the millions lost, then opened them with steel in his gaze. We held them here, he said, his voice steady. But this war is not finished. Earth is safe, but the Crethar still breathe. Across the world, survivors poured from bunkers. They looked up at the skies filled with wreckage and fire, and they knew the truth. They had not only defended their home, they had proven to themselves and the galaxy that humanity's rage could withstand anything. The Crethar had struck at Earth with all their fury, and they had failed. Humanity had stood in the fire. Humanity had survived. And now humanity's anger demanded more. This battle had saved Earth, but the war was far from over. The time had come not only to defend, but to strike back. Humanity would carry its rage into the stars, and the Crethar would learn what it meant to be hunted. The smoke of battle still hung above Earth. Wreckage drifted across the void, broken pieces of both human and Crethar ships glinting in the light of the sun. Humanity had defended its cradle, but no one looked at the ruins with relief alone. They looked with fire in their eyes. Earth was safe, but the war was not over. Now it was humanity's turn to strike. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Rains stood before the War Council. A map of the galaxy shimmered across the hollow table. Glowing red markers showed Crethar strongholds, slave worlds, and shipyards. "They struck our home," Rains said, his voice steady. "Now we take theirs." His words were not a suggestion, they were an order. Across human space, fleets began to move. What had once been a scattered defense now became a united spear. Carriers loaded with fighters left their docks. Dreadnoughts were armed with new weapons designed in the fires of desperation. Destroyers and frigates surged forward in endless lines. It was not a fleet of defense anymore. It was an army of wrath. The first target was a Crethar outpost on the edge of their empire, a fortress world where slaves were forced to build war machines. When the human fleet arrived, the Crethar commanders laughed. They expected fear. They expected hesitation. Instead, they found humanity's rage. Railguns hammered the surface from orbit, smashing Crethar fortresses to rubble. Human dropships poured through the atmosphere. Marines stormed the camps. Their rifles roared, their voices filled with vengeance. Slaves of dozens of species stared in disbelief as humans tore down their cages. For the first time, they saw soldiers who fought not to enslave, but to free. One alien child, thin and scarred, looked up at a human marine and whispered, "Why do you fight for us?" The soldier only answered with a grim smile, "Because the Crethar made us angry." The galaxy took notice. News spread faster than light. Whole species whispered in awe that humanity was not only resisting, but burning the Dominion strongholds. Some cheered, others trembled, wondering if humans were liberators or a new storm that would consume them too. The Crethar, humiliated, launched counterattacks. Fleets poured from their core worlds. Determined to crush the uprising, battles lit up every corner of the frontier. In the Eridan system, a human supercarrier sacrificed itself to hold a choke point, buying time for civilians to flee. In the Tarsus Belt, a squadron of human destroyers lured Crethar battleships into an asteroid field and detonated mines that ripped them apart. Every victory came at a price, but every price paid sharpened humanity's fury. The turning point came when humanity struck at a Crethar shipyard orbiting the world of Dorak. It was a place where entire fleets were birthed, guarded by hundreds of warships. The Resolute led the attack. Human dreadnoughts pounded the defenses while carriers launched wave after wave of fighters. Explosions filled the void as ship after ship was destroyed. The battle lasted 3 days, and when it was done, the shipyard was nothing but molten debris. For the first time in centuries, the Crethar Dominion felt fear. They had crushed countless species, enslaved billions, ruled without challenge. Now they were losing world by world, fleet by fleet. Humanity was burning its way across their empire. In the ruins of Dorak, Admiral Rains broadcast a message across the galaxy. His face was scarred, his voice low but thunderous. "We are humanity. We are the ones you thought weak. You made us angry, and now we will not stop until every chain is broken, until the Dominion is ash." Liberated worlds cheered. Entire populations swore loyalty to humanity. Slave soldiers turned their weapons on their former masters. The Crethar tried to call humans monsters, but the galaxy could see the truth. Humanity was fighting with fury, yes, but also with purpose. Still, the war was not won. The Crethar homeworld remained, a fortress deep in their empire, defended by fleets larger than anything humanity had yet faced. Their rulers screamed for revenge, promising that humanity would drown in its own blood. But their threats sounded hollow. The galaxy had seen too much. In the shadows of space, humanity prepared for the final strike. Shipyards emptied. Every last dreadnought, every last carrier, every fighter that could fly was armed and fueled. Soldiers kissed their families goodbye, knowing some would never return. On every world, crowds raised their fists to the skies, shouting the words that had become a vow. "We are not kneeling." Admiral Rains stood at the heart of it all, watching as the greatest fleet in human history assembled. Tens of thousands of ships stretched across the stars. Their engines burned like suns, their weapons gleamed, their banners waved. This was not a fleet of defense, nor even a fleet of war. This was a fleet of annihilation. The Crethar had believed humanity fragile. They had believed humanity would bow. Now they saw the truth. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was wrath. Humanity was the storm, and the storm was coming for their homeworld. The galaxy held its breath as humanity's greatest fleet gathered. Tens of thousands of ships filled the void. Carriers, dreadnoughts, destroyers, and frigates aligned in endless rows. Fighters buzzed around them like angry hornets. Engines glowed like suns, their light reflecting off steel hulls. This was not just an armada, it was the embodiment of fury. It was humanity's answer to the Dominion. At the heart of the fleet stood the Resolute, Admiral Rains on its bridge. His eyes were fixed on the map glowing before him. The Crethar homeworld pulsed red at the center, a fortress protected by layers of fleets, shipyards, and planetary defenses. The Dominion believed themselves untouchable. They had enslaved countless worlds, crushed rebellions, and ruled through terror, but now their enemies were at the gates. The order went out: engage hyperspace drives. In one moment, the stars stretched, and in the next, humanity stood before the Crethar's last refuge, the homeworld of the Dominion filled the screens, a massive planet covered in black fortresses and glowing red scars. Orbiting it were thousands of warships, more than humanity had ever faced in one place. The Crethar had gathered everything. It was their final stand. The Crethar ruler appeared on every frequency, a towering figure clad in living armor. His voice thundered like a storm. Humans, you are nothing but insects. Your rage will burn. Out, your species will kneel. His words dripped with arrogance, but beneath them was fear. For the first time in centuries, the Crethar were fighting for survival. Admiral Rains gave no reply. He only lifted his hand and spoke one word: attack. The void exploded. Railguns thundered. Torpedoes streaked forward. Lasers carved through shields. The Crethar responded in kind, filling space with fire and destruction. Carriers released clouds of fighters. Human and Crethar swarms clashed in chaotic dances of death. Thousands of ships lit up the darkness. With fire, a human dreadnought, the Ironclad, broke through the first line of defense. Its cannons roared, tearing apart 3 Crethar cruisers before finally collapsing under a storm of enemy fire. It drifted in flames, but its sacrifice opened a path. Human destroyers poured through, unleashing missiles that shattered an enemy carrier. The Crethar fought with desperation. Their ships collided with human vessels and suicidal rams. Their living weapons latched onto hulls, tearing through armor. But humanity gave no ground. Carriers launched wave after wave of fighters. Dreadnoughts unleashed weapons that shook entire formations. Marines boarded Crethar stations, tearing down fortresses from within. The battle raged for hours. Neither side yielded. The void became a graveyard of steel and fire. But slowly the Crethar lines bent, then broke. Humanity's fury pushed deeper, closer to the planet. On the surface of the Crethar homeworld, their cities trembled as bombardments rained down. Towers that had stood for centuries collapsed in. Fire, slave camps erupted in chaos. Chains were shattered as humans descended, liberating thousands. For the first time, the slaves saw their masters running, fleeing. Afraid, the Crethar ruler, desperate, unleashed his final weapon. A massive dreadnought, larger than any ship humanity had ever seen, emerged from orbit. Its weapons were designed to tear planets apart. Its shadow dwarfed the fleets around it. The Crethar roared in defiance, believing this monster would crush the humans. Admiral Rains did not falter. All ships converge on that target, he commanded. Humanity's fury turned as one. Railguns hammered, torpedoes struck, fighters swarmed like fireflies. The colossal dreadnought unleashed beams that split carriers in half. Entire wings of fighters burned away. Still humanity charged. The Resolute itself led the assault, its cannons glowing red from the heat. The fight against the giant ship lasted. Longer than any battle before. Thousands died. Ships exploded like stars. But piece by piece, the monster fell. A human destroyer rammed into its side, tearing open its shields. Fighters dove into its hangars, detonating from within. Finally, a barrage from the Resolute's railguns punched through its core. The beast erupted in a fireball that blinded the stars. Cheers filled human comms. The Crethar fleet, seeing their greatest weapon destroyed, faltered and broke. One by one, their ships fell silent or fled. Humanity pressed forward without mercy. The skies, above the Krethar homeworld, were no longer black. They were fire. On the surface, Krethar rulers cowered in their fortresses, but human marines broke their gates, dragging them out before the liberated slaves. For centuries, the Dominion had ruled by fear. Now they trembled before the very species. They had mocked. Admiral Rains sent one final message across the galaxy, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of every life lost. This is what happens when you make humanity angry. The Krethar Dominion is no more. Let all who hear this remember, humanity kneels to no one. The Krethar homeworld burned, their fleets shattered, their rule ended. The last species that thought humanity weak was gone. The galaxy trembled. Some feared humanity's wrath, others saw hope in their fire. But none could deny the truth. When humanity was cornered, when humanity was made to bleed, they became unstoppable. The war was over. Humanity stood victorious, scarred but unbroken, their enemies annihilated, their rage carved into history. The stars themselves would remember the day the Krethar fell, the day the last species to make humanity angry was annihilated completely.